In the first part of this video, we took a look at how chips were formed, and we specifically looked at how cutting angles affected chip formation. Let's continue by taking a look at how depth of cut affects chip formation. Using the cutting tool that had the neutral cutting angle on it and the same metal part as we did in the first demonstration, we're going to take 3 different cuts. One first cut will be very deep, the second cut will be at a normal depth, and the third cut will be very light. We can then compare the chips that we obtain from each different depth of cut. So let's start by the deepest cut. Now let's try a more acceptable depth of cut. And now let's look at what happens when we don't have enough depth of cut. We can now take a look at the 3 chips that were produced by these 3 cutting actions, starting with the chip produced by a large depth of cut. It's easy to see that this chip isn't very well formed. It was torn off the part rather than formed from it. In reality, this type of chip that we call discontinuous is in an eternal startup mode. It never manages to form itself properly. This constant start, stop chip formation produces a very low frequency vibration that is very hard on the tool and which produces a very poor surface finish. The second chip, the one that we produced when using a reasonable depth of cut, is representative of a continuous chip form. This type of continuous chip indicates that we've found a balance point between all our variables. This is by far the best type of chip for maximizing our machining. The chip produced by a lack of depth, well, it isn't even a chip, it's just metal dust. These powdery chips are to be avoided. They are a clear indication that there is never enough accumulation ahead of the tool to be able to form a proper chip. The production of these powdery chips are often accompanied by high frequency vibration. The lack of depth of cut means that the tool is pushing material out of the way and never producing a chip. This pushing away of material creates huge amounts of friction and has a tendency to melt off the cutting edge of the tool. It's important to remember that reducing the depth of cut to almost nothing will never give you a proper surface finish. So, we've seen how the depth of cut affects chip formation. But what about feed? Well, feed affects the chip formation in the same way that depth of cut affected the chip formation. Increasing the feed of a cutting action is very similar to increasing the depth of a cutting action. In both cases, we're thickening up the chip. So feed and depth of cut affect chip formation in about the same way. So why use one instead of the other to adjust your cutting action? Personally, I prefer using depth of cut to adjust my cutting action, seeing that feed is more directly related to surface finish. I tend to select the feed I want and then adjust with the depth of cut. We now understand how the 4 basic variables affect chip formation. But before we can apply that knowledge, we're going to have to find a starting point. Numbers. Where do we start? As mentioned at the start of this video, The cutting speeds are given to us by the manufacturers, and they are specific to each type of metal that we're cutting. We can find cutting speeds in all kinds of reference documents and manuals, such as the Machinery's Handbook. In the imperial system, cutting speeds are given to us in feet per minute, and in the metric system, they're provided in meters per minute. Here are the cutting speeds for the materials most often used in machine shops. Mild steel has a cutting speed of about 100 feet per minute. Medium carbon steel around 70 feet per minute. And high carbon steel about 50 feet per minute. A good middle of the road speed for cutting aluminum would be about 300 feet per minute. Brass can be cut at around 200 feet per minute, and bronze around 80 feet per minute. If we were using a bandsaw or a shaper, in other words a machine tool that cuts in a linear fashion, we could use these cutting speeds directly. However, most cutting tools cut in a rotary fashion, so we're going to have to find a way to transform these linear numbers into rotary numbers. To do that, we're going to use two very simple formulas. The first in imperial is cutting speeds times 4 divided by diameter. And in metric, we're going to use cutting speed by 300 divided by the diameter. Those two formulas are the simplified version of the formulas generally used, which are cutting speeds times 12 divided by pi diameter. And in metric, cutting speeds times 1000 divided by pi diameter. Since these formulas are really only used to determine an approximate value for our maximum RPM, well, I prefer to use the simplified version. Let's take a look at an imperial example. We're going to drill a 1/2 inch hole in a plate of mild steel. The cutting speed for mild steel is approximately 100 feet per minute. So 100 times 4, 4 being our constant, divided by the diameter, in this case a 1/2 inch drill. So 100 times 4 divided by 0.5 equals 800 RPM. Now if we looked at a metric example, maybe we could turn on a lathe a 13 millimeter diameter part, again in mild steel. So we have our cutting speed, which is around 30 meters per minute, times 300, which is our constant, divided by the diameter of what is in rotation, in this case a 13 millimeter mild steel bar. So we have 30 meters per minute times 300 divided by our diameter, which is 13 millimeters, and that'll give us approximately 700 RPM. It's important to note that the diameter of the part or of the tool, depending on which one is in rotation, has to be entered into the imperial formula in inches and into the metric formula in millimeters. You may have noticed that these formulas provide us with inversely proportional answers. In other words, large tools turn slowly and small tools have to turn quite rapidly. We can also notice that these formulas are linear, so everything is proportional. That means that a 1-inch diameter part will have twice the RPM of a 2-inch diameter part. We have to remember that the speeds that we are calculating are maximum RPMs that we will probably never attain. I strongly suggest that you start at about a 1/3 reduction of the calculated speed. We can then increase our RPM if you feel that you have to, up to the calculated RPM. But remember, never go faster than what you calculated. So that'll do for the RPM, but what about feed? Feed is really selected depending on the surface finish that I want to obtain. On the lathe, a finishing cut would be somewhere around 3 to 6 thousandths of an inch per revolution. A finishing cutting tool for lathe work has to have a large tool nose radius. That slow feed, coupled with a very shallow depth of cut and a tool that has a large radius nose on it, will produce cuspids that are almost imperceptible. That means that we'll have a very good surface finish. So that 3 to 6 thousandths of an inch feed gives us a really nice finish, but really isn't very productive. If, however, we want to be a little more efficient with our machining and take larger cuts, we're going to have to do a roughing cut. For roughing, I recommend somewhere between 7 and 12 thousandths of an inch per rev, and a tool that has a very small radius on its point. This small tool radius, coupled with a good depth of cut and a fast feed, will produce a cut that removes quickly a lot of material, but that leaves a poor surface finish. A lathe has only one motor that drives the feed and the spindle, so the two are very closely linked. That's why we express feed on a lathe as distance per revolution of part. As an example, on the lathe, we would say for a roughing cut that our feed is somewhere between 7 and 12 inches per rev. Milling machines work quite differently. The motor that moves the feed is separate from the motor that moves the spindle. And that is why feed on the mill is expressed in distance per minute rather than distance per turn, as was the case with the lathe. Another major difference between milling machines and lathes as far as feed goes is that the lathe generally uses single cutting lip tools, whereas the milling machine can use tools that have multiple cutting lips. This means that we can't just choose a feed like we did on the lathe. On the mill, we have to calculate our feed. The formula for calculating feed on a mill is RPM times the number of teeth on our cutter times the chip load per tooth. As was the case on the lathe, milling machine feeds can be either roughing or finishing. For general, everyday milling, I would recommend a tooth load of approximately 2 to 5 thousandths of an inch for finishing, and around 6 to 8 thousandths of an inch for roughing. As an example, let's choose a 2-flute end mill, turning at 100 RPM with a tooth load of about 4 thousandths of an inch. So we have 100 RPM times 2 flutes times a chip load of 4 thousandths of an inch. So 100 times 2 is 200 times 0.004 tooth load. That will give us 0.8 inches per minute. That means that to produce a chip thickness of 4 thousandths of an inch each time the tool cuts the part, well, I have to move at 0.8 inches per minute. Now, if I double the number of teeth on the tool, I'm going to double the feed. It's linear and proportional. Now, it's important to remember that on the lathe, feed and speed rotation are mechanically linked, which isn't the case on a milling machine. So on the mill, if you turn up or down the RPM of the tool, you're going to change your tooth load. Now remember, the diameter of the part on the lathe or the diameter of the tool on the mill, in other words, whatever is in rotation, has a huge influence on the speed that we're going to turn at. However, the diameter of the tool on the mill and the diameter of the part on the lathe has very little impact on the feed that we're going to choose. And it is also very important to remember that the speed at which a tool turns has nothing to do with the number of teeth on the tool. A 2-flute end mill will turn exactly at the same RPM as a 4-flute end mill of the same diameter. So the number of teeth affects the feed on a mill, but not its RPM. I'm not going to talk about feed on drill presses, seeing that most drill presses that we use do not have an automatic feed on them. In reality, the feed on a drill press is really controlled by the chisel edge of the drill bit itself and by the amount of pressure that I apply. I should really apply just enough pressure to see a nice chip being formed. And there you go, cutting speeds, RPMs, feeds, and how chips are formed. Now it's certain that I've simplified this presentation as much as possible, but it is still an excellent starting point. Understanding chip formation, speeds, and feeds is very important to anyone who wishes to become a good machinist. Your best ally in this task is observation. Pay attention to the chip being formed. Pay attention to the surface finish that you obtain. Pay attention to the sound produced by the machining operation. These clues will help you adjust your chip formation variables and will help you obtain that perfect chip. Remember, cutting properly will extend the life of your cutting tools and will save you a lot of money and a lot of time. So, happy machining!